Good morning.
Morning. Good to see you.
Good to see you too. Not even to ask you how you're doing because I know that things are tough right now.
Wow. Yeah, I feel like I can't get to 100% feeling like physically better, which makes like a cloud of depression. Even though
Mhm.
I know I'm not depressed, but
Yeah.
it feels like I'm wearing glasses. It feels like I'm filtering the world through grief and rage and uh, yeah, I can only make sounds. Blah.
Yeah, totally
So,
fair.
yeah.
Totally fair.
Yeah. How about you?
Um, I feel like I've been there and I'm moving out. Which I feel bad saying when you're still in it.
No, I'm rooting for you and everybody else.
I know. I know. Um, yeah, was feeling lots of grief and anger and confusion about what it all meant and what I was supposed to be learning and what I was supposed to do with it. And I feel like I'm getting clarity and I feel like it's coming more and more quickly I feel like every moment I'm just like, oh, and this and this. And I'm just starting to connect the dots and understand, how to show up, I think in the ways that I'm being called to. Yeah, so it's still like fresh and new and raw, but it's exciting. It's exciting energy as opposed to like the heavy and the dark, which is where I've been. So
Yeah. Oh, I look forward to that being my
yeah.
truth one day. Yeah. And I thinking about Jetta Robinson was like posting about like coming back to yourself, and that's really been resonating for me the last couple of days is like I feel like I keep trying to come back to myself. Like when I peel back the layers of grief, of rage, of like sickness, it's like who is this version of me and
Mhm.
what does that version of me feel called to?
Yeah.
What do I want to do? I feel like the last year has been recommitting to
Mhm.
marriage, to parenthood, to work, to entrepreneurship, like all these different things. And so yeah, trying to figure out like what's genuine now, not what I've always known myself to be or what I've known myself to be the last couple of years, but what feels true now.
Hmm. Right. It feels what I kept trying to tell myself in the moment is like I'm transforming and I'm shedding old stuff and I'm growing new stuff. And like that is a messy, uncomfortable process, but it's necessary. So it's like just
Mhm.
just be
Oh,
here while I have to be
I
here.
know. Oh,
Oh.
yeah.
Yeah.
We went to the movies this weekend to see like this independent film called Origin, which is an adaptation of Isabel Wilkerson's book Caste, The Origin of Our Discontent. And I don't know. I mean, I knew it would be a powerful movie because I love Ava DuVernay's work, and I try to support Black artists, but I found myself crying through so much of the movie, and I think it's because it touched the grief and the rage and the despair. I think that's inside of me, and so like Cass is just like basically she talks about how the word racism doesn't capture like sufficiently what's happening, like in the US, what's happening in the world, that caste is a better notion, like this idea that every society has different hierarchies.
Yeah.
Um, and it was between that, like just the ongoing genocide, racism, othering of people, not letting people have liberation. But then also like the personal relationships, like an interracial marriage, death. Like it was just like, yeah, it just touched my soul, my spirit. Even my spouse was tearful and crying in it. It was just, yeah, I encourage everybody to go see it.
Right. Sounds so powerful.
Yeah.
Sounds so powerful. Um, One of the things that I was just sharing with you that you thought might be helpful and kind of like unpacking some of the movie or some of what's rattling around inside of you, that the movie touched. I was, one of my husband's friends was being inducted into his high school's Hall of Fame, for his basketball career. And so this couple, he and his wife, invited, I don't know, 15 of their closest friends. And while we've been with their friends and so many times, right, for major events and their wedding and blah, 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 we found ourselves as the racial minority at this event for the induction, for the dinner, for the celebration afterwards. And while my husband and I are used to being in racially diverse spaces, that's our group of friends, that's our neighborhood, that's our school system. I don't remember the last time that we were only 2 of 4 white people, with a lot of people of color who we don't know well. And I found myself having, I mean, I guess it's not strange, but it felt very uncomfortable. Almost wanting to like prove that I'm a good white person. Um, and like I said to you prior, I'm sure I've done that a million times, but just not with the awareness that I currently have. So to feel all of that and be aware of it and almost like see it happening, but struggle to make sense of it or be more intentional in the moment, it was wild. It was really, really wild. And yeah, well, I don't think I did harm per se. I didn't I didn't love how I showed up and how I felt and the effect that that could have had. So I just wanted to be honest about that, because I think it's just not something we talk about, or at least that white people, it's not something that white people are honest about.
Sure, yeah. And
Uh,
I'm sure most white people don't put themselves in a situation where they are in the minority, right? Even if they have a racially diverse group of friends, how often are they
right.
the minority, or how often are they aware that maybe race is a vibe in the space, right? And that one's whiteness, regardless of like where you are in your racial awareness, is like having an impact on the room,
Totally.
especially in this like celebratory space
What do you mean?
where it's like it was like in celebration of this, achievement that this
I see what you're
person.
saying. Mm-hmm. Right.
And so there were other people who your nervous system wasn't used to,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like they haven't gotten to know who you are, right? They're
Mm-hmm.
just, they're getting a sense of what your skin pigmentation is and however you are in this moment.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I mean, I always struggle in big groups. Period. That's just who I am. Um,
Um,
it, and but this struggle was palpably different. And like so aware of how I was being perceived if and what my role was. Like I was curious about people, but the questions I found myself asking were all about their work. And I'm like,
hmm,
what? It was just,
right.
it
It's
felt
like you being uncomfortable had you like go to a part of you you're not used to inhabiting anymore.
that's right. But I didn't know what else to ask. And I didn't know what else to say. And I was like, all these people know each other. I am the outsider.
Mhm.
Um, is it okay to get to know them, or is that taking up space? Because they already know whatever everybody knows what everybody does for work. Like,
Right.
but oh my God, and
And I mean,
they
and I think,
seemed uncomfortable.
right, they seemed uncomfortable.
There were moments where not uncomfortable isn't the right word, but it
Like
felt like we
awkward.
were going through the motions sense? Like of just
Right,
this is what people do.
right. Yeah. I mean, it's interesting because I mean, I feel like I've been socialized to ask people about work or school or like, that part of their life. And I know in the last several years I've made a conscious effort to not ask that. But yeah, I feel like sometimes when I'm a little frozen or uncomfortable, it's hard to remember like what else do people talk about when they're getting to know each other?
I was totally clueless, but then this interesting thing happened where the only friend that I had there, the couple, the woman who had invited us, I said something about this woman was telling me about was telling us about some trips that she'd been going on, and she'd been going with her sister.
Mm.
And it was a moment of grief because I currently don't have a relationship with my sister. But I felt hopeful and I felt love. I loved hearing about her trips and her relationship with her sister. And I said something like that, that I'm like, oh my gosh, I love hearing about you and your sister. It makes my heart warm. And my friend said something to me like, oh, Colleen, don't you have a sister? And it was a choice point for me where I was like, I knew what I should have said. Like, yeah, she whatever, blah, 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 blah. She's a teacher and she lives here and like whatever. And that's what I would have done. But because I was so like in my head, but also I had one foot very in my head, but one foot very embodied too. I was able to say, like, I said a couple of things I knew I was supposed to say. And then I was like, you know what? I'm sorry I'm being so awkward. My sister is struggling with X, Y, and Z. So we don't have a relationship. And like, that's why I'm being so fucking awkward. So, like, I'm sorry. I know I'm not supposed to say something this like dark and real 5 minutes into meeting you all, but like, that's the truth. And that changed everything.
Sure.
It changed the feel, I think, of everybody else, myself included, but I still continued to feel like, how am I showing up and how is it being like whatever? And like, what is it okay? But I think I was able to relax because I felt everybody else relax a little.
Yeah,
Um, yeah, and it was a moment of like shared humanity.
sure. Yeah.
Which
And I
felt
feel like you're really skillful. I feel at that. Like vulnerability is like your superpower in many ways. And I feel like that deepens intimacy in so many relationships, even though sometimes, the receiver isn't always able to hold the space for that. Um, but I mean, I guess I feel like for me, when I'm often the minority in the room, I feel like my old pattern is to make myself small and invisible. Um, and I feel like it's harder for me, even though I've been working on it, to try to let people get to know me. I feel like it's hard for me to let the armor down.
makes so much sense.
Yeah. So,
When you hear me as a white person talk about that experience and how I was showing up and how I may have and how my whiteness may have been impacting people's experience, I wonder how that lands for you, especially given where you are right now.
right. I mean, I guess I feel like, I love hearing when white people are the minority in a space because I feel like it gives them a window into almost my daily occurrence,
Yeah.
right? And so I feel like the more people can have the experience of being the thing that they don't tend to be, the more, I guess, empathy builds or more, I just think about so often I'm thinking about like, how does my blackness show up here? Or like, do I answer honestly? Because race is so often a factor. And I feel like so often people can't quite understand. Um, like that politeness that people engage in that doesn't make things go very deep. So I feel like it probably felt really uncomfortable to you and there probably was a dynamic that was happening, but I think that's just part of settling into a new space, you know? And you just happen to be aware that race plays a factor. Most people are oblivious.
Right. Right. And because I was aware, palpably aware, it's like I wanted to acknowledge it or name it, but doing that
That,
felt
that would be centering yourself, right? Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
Right. So it's like, so that's, I guess that's the lesson, right? Is like, I just sit, I just sit in it.
That's
I,
right.
I can't fix it. I can't make it better. I like for anybody. I just sit in it.
Yeah. What a gift.
Oh, that's a good reframe.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah. Because I feel like so often white people get uncomfortable and then they do stuff
it's weird,
that
right?
yeah, that centers themselves, that makes the people who are not white or even white have to take care of them. Sometimes it escalates to like violence or calling the police or other kinds of things. It just feels like, yeah, for white people to just sit in their discomfort and, you know, keep building the muscle, right?
Yeah,
Eventually transforms.
right, right. One of the things that I was so aware of is I wanted there were I was sitting across the table from two Black women, and I don't know how else to say this other than like I wanted them to know I saw them. Um, like I can't fully, right? Like I don't know jack shit about them. Um, yeah, the the closest I got that I prayed wasn't weird, but one of the women said that they were going to run for office. They're hold a government position, and and I celebrated that spontaneously. That was like maybe the one thing that wasn't like very strategically like worked through in my head. I started to like clap and I got excited and I was like, yes, yes, yes. Like if women ran the world, like this world would be such a different place. And I was like, and we need more women of color in these positions. And it was like the one thing I ventured that was like, I see you as a Black woman that I hoped didn't feel weird or gross or I don't know,
Right.
but it's like,
Yeah, and it's like risking making a mistake, right? Because like
yeah,
for some people, they feel so seen when you see them as who they are as a racial or ethnic being, and other people are like, I just want to be seen
right,
not related to, right? So it's kind of like, I think that's like the white supremacy culture characteristics, right? Is like, how do we risk showing up authentically, knowing that sometimes whatever we do or say isn't going to land well with whoever is in front of us?
right,
And like, how do we build the longer term relationships?
yeah,
Because I think part of what I'm sitting with is what are people doing in the long term?
yeah,
Not these one-off things, but like, what are we doing in the long term? I've been reading, or I think part of what I'm struggling with is like what's on my social media feed. I think particularly LinkedIn and Instagram, which are probably the two I'm on the most, um, is so many activists and people of the global majority who are angry and grieving and posting things to like keep people awake,
yeah,
right? And it feels like too much. Like part of the reason they're on my feed is I don't want to be asleep. Like
right,
I want to be awake and doing what I can for liberation. But part of it is like I need moments of joy. I need moments of rest.
Yeah.
I want to be a long-term activist, and right now I need to hibernate because my body is telling me I'm doing too much. And I guess I just think about, yeah, part of me is so enraged of like so many white bodies who appear to be asleep or caught up in the everyday grind and not fighting for liberation.
Yeah.
And
Right.
in some ways it's hard to be with those people who seem everywhere. So
Absolutely. Right. And to want a moment to hide from it all and to pull the proverbial covers over your head and just
yeah.
stay in bed a little longer.
Mm, yeah, I've been reading romance novels. Like
Yeah.
it's the character's a biracial Korean woman, so or teenager, and so that feels nice to at least be centering, an Asian story, but like, taking a break from anti-racism, Jewish, Palestinian, like history, like Israel history. Like I need a break.
Yeah.
Um, and then when I got out of Origin, so because Origin hasn't been playing in a lot of places, as an independent film, we went to Philadelphia, which is like about 45 minutes away from us to see it. And it's like in the Temple University, which is like an urban area, which has like a higher number of, Black and brown people. And when we were leaving, right, so I'm like emotionally raw, we're leaving the theater, and this Black man like has the door open and he says, "Have a good night." He said, "Watch out. There are a lot of kids." And so like we turn the corner and there's probably like 100 or 200 Black teenagers like running up and down the the street. And I had like this whole processing of like fear,
Mm.
uh, and um, like, but the beauty of like, I don't think I'm often around like so many Black kids, like teenagers, just like a Saturday night, living their life, having fun. And yet I could see how people could be afraid, because they're like immersed in Black culture. And so they're like maybe a little louder. And I could see how their bodies could appear threatening to some people, especially if you're not used to that. And so like I could feel like all the stuff, and I remember telling myself like, don't be afraid. Like, um, but yeah, my nervous system was afraid, partly because the guy had said it, but
Sure.
partly because it's like this is the caste system, right? That like puts Black and brown bodies at the bottom and says that there's someone to fear. And when you see them gathered in a group, it has to be trouble. And then, part of what was in the movie of Origin, I don't want to give too much away, is like Trayvon Martin's story was part of the story. And so then it was just thinking of him and like, this teenager who like, was just having fun, just walking home and like gone. Um, so yeah, it was just like, it's like I can't get away from race. I don't want to get away from race, and yet it is heartbreaking. Um, and so I was thinking about how in 2020, 2021, with the racial reckoning, which now I'm calling like white people's racial reckoning, that, all these jobs and opportunities were created, particularly for Black women, and like how so many of those have been taken away, and like that betrayal. So I'm sitting with some of that stuff too. Yeah. So
Yeah.
it's all in there
Um,
churning, and I don't want to totally look at it, but then it's like, well, I kind of do this for a living to kind of look at this stuff. So it's hard to lie to myself for a prolonged period of time. I wish I had that strategy sometimes. I'm thankful for those people out there who have that strategy.
the compartmentalization strategy.
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Denial. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I know all of it. It certainly serves a purpose, doesn't it? Power, there are powerful strategies too powerful.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So like my tussle is like there's lots of wonderful white people in my life and I can't stand white people. Like it's all of that churning and trying not to make any of it become binary. And like it's effortful to stay in the nuance, to stay in the complicated, the love and the disgust and the love and the disappointment and the rage and the joy, like all of that stuff feels enormous inside of me. And
Mhm.
then, regular things of parenting and working and
Right.
paying the bills, all the things.
Right.
Yeah. So,
It's a lot.
yeah, it's my story.
We were just saying, before we started recording that like you don't have a lot of places to name it in just like a very real
Mm,
raw way. How are you doing having said all of it and in real time and it's not wrapped up in a bow, you're just in it.
yeah, I mean, I think it feels freeing for now. And I think it's just a good reminder of, even though I know I have built a life that has a lot of people in it that I can talk to, I feel like for some reason right now it feels hard to access those
Yeah.
spaces. And I think part of it is because I'm less social. Um, the introvert in me is like, it's just, I need to conserve the energy to just like do my 9 to 5 job. And what do I have left over after that?
Yeah.
So it feels weird to like show up to run workshops and the workshops go well. Like I'm showing up in those spaces and leading them, but then it feels like you were talking about observing yourself, right? It's like I can observe myself being able to be competent and facilitate, and yet there's a part of me that is,
Turning and
yeah, and I'm sure eventually it will be a beautiful offering, but for now it just feels messy.
messy and isolating. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, and part of it is self-imposed
No, I
because
don't.
I don't know any other way to be. This is how I've always been. But I can even feel it in my marriage. Like there's a barrier there because I just can't.
Ooh,
I can't drive it, and I'm usually the driver in the relationship. So even though my Chris and I saw this movie together, we didn't really unpack it. We both said we cried, but we didn't really unpack.
connect on it.
Yeah, and I think I just can't right
Right.
now.
Because it landed so differently. It profoundly impacted him.
Yeah,
But it's, of course, it's going to land very differently. So, like, where is the
yeah,
bridge?
yeah, absolutely. So,
Yeah.
yeah,
Oh, I hear all of that. And that's like for me, and I wonder if this resonates for you, is like the cruel irony or catch 22 of being in one of these moments. Like, there's so much there and churning and dissonance and exhaustion and all of it. And it's like the time when connection would be so helpful, but connection also feels impossible because like
yeah,
where that requires energy and you've got none.
yep, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and I feel like I'm trying to parent in a way that's liberatory for my kids, and I feel like I've been holding back from them. And part of that is because I don't want them to worry about me. Like I'm saying little things, like probably how I checked in here, like I can feel like a depressive filter, even though I know I'm not depressed. I think you and I've alluded to kind of having some, you know, complicated relationship with my own sibling, right? And so like I don't want to mess up their relationship with their, family member. So it's like all of these ways of like trying to take care of people, but yet being honest with myself about I'm okay, but I'm not okay. And like how do I hold
Oh,
those truths? Like I know I'll be okay, I'll get through this, like it's a phase. But right now I'm in it.
yeah. And that makes so much sense. That makes so much sense given everything. Yeah.
Yeah.
What does support look like from me? What does love look like from me?
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, I feel like this conversation's helpful because instead of me just like holding it for the rest of the week, I feel like I'm sure something is shifting and maybe you'll be able to watch it and then we could chat about it.
Love that.
Um, um, so yeah, I mean, I think just being in relationship is good. Maybe I'll text you during the week randomly about something. I don't know what, but just
Wait for it.
someone who knows what's what's beyond the surface.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, because I think I do a pretty good show. Even like when I'm isolated, I think I do a pretty good show. So,
Oh,
yeah.
yeah. I relate a lot to that. And that's such a good point that, right? Like, God, that's what I've been sitting with so much is this idea that I always am looking for like, what's the fix? And even if it's not that urgent or transactional, it's like, what's the direction? What's the more positive outcome? Like what's next? I am
Right.
always looking for what's next. And I feel like what I've been coming to is like, maybe it's not what's next. Maybe it's just being witnessed in what's now
Right.
and
Right.
feeling supported and seen and heard and believed in the right now, in the mess, in the dark, in the ugly. Like
Mhm.
maybe that's all that's required.
Yeah. Yeah.
And like that's not new, right? Like there's nothing about that.
No,
It's like,
no. But if we haven't built that muscle, right? Like,
yeah,
you
yeah,
know, because I even think about myself like, well, maybe I am depressed. Maybe this is like the Black person's version of being depressed, right? Like I think about how often we hear about these Black people who are pretty successful or like they appear,
right,
to have it and then they like die by suicide or like whatever happens to them and you're like, I had no idea. So like I'm also wrestling with like, is this me depressed? I was like, I don't think so. But it's like, but would it be okay if it was,
right.
right? Like, um, or is it just like winter depressive energy,
Mhm.
grief, loss intermingled together? Like, and it's like, does it need a label? But
Right,
labels are helpful to me. So it's
right.
like, who knows?
Yep. Yeah. No, I hear you. And I was just struggling with the same kind of things. And the thing that is feeling true for me right now that I already shared with you is like it's transformation, right? It's transformation. It's for me at least, not imposing that on you, but for me, it's whenever I'm in this energy, that kind of energy,
Right.
it's a shedding, it's a letting go of identities, people, systems, ways of being, etc., and trying to incorporate something new. And all of that is exhausting. Um, it's exhausting.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I feel like, did you hear the story of, I don't know, some Sesame Street character? What's it? Yeah, I don't remember which some Sesame Street character in the last couple of weeks posted on social media like asking people how they were. And
Oh,
then they got like all of these comments of like people weren't okay. And like it became like viral in some sort of way. And it's like lots of people are struggling out in the world.
money.
Right? It's like if you're like awake and like taking in what's happening in the world, like I'm like in the country, outside of the country, there's lots of reasons to be depressed or despairing or like an anxious teenager thinking about like, what is this world we're leaving for people? What's this world we're living in? And so sometimes that's helpful to think about like lots of people are putting on a show
Right.
and like acting like they're okay, but how can you be okay when you see like death toll increasing? Um, or, you know, just the loss of life or just cruelty to our neighbors or siblings or whoever.
Right.
It just feels like, yeah, there's lots of joy if you look close enough, but there's so much other stuff.
That's right. And these moments make the joy harder to, like, you need to walk around with like a magnifying glass and
Uh,
like
yeah.
and a flashlight and constantly like it's just it has to be so much more active and intentional in order to find it. And without that, it can feel like it's not there.
Mhm. Absolutely. I think that's why I'm enjoying this romance series I'm reading. It's
Mhm.
like just like young teenage love, like the
Oh,
beginning of it, right? Yeah, it's just like, oh,
that's
it's so
lovely.
sweet, right? It's just like innocence and awkwardness and anxiety and all the firsts. It's just like, oh, my spirit needs just that.
Mm-hmm. Mm. Oh, that's really interesting. Have you seen Love on the Spectrum?
No, but I was at lunch with some friends yesterday and I was saying how a couple people had mentioned that I should check that out. So, yeah,
It's it's a
I've never
different,
tried.
it meets the same need as a romance novel.
Right.
It is, oh, it's about romance. But like, I even forget it's about romance because it's just,
Right.
it's so beautiful and profound to see difference celebrated,
Mm,
right? In this very wholesome, basic kind
right.
of way.
Yeah.
Just
Right.
people doing what people do.
Right.
You would love it.
I'm gonna have to put
And
it
I've
on
been
my
loving
list.
it. Would you?
I'm gonna have to put it on my list of things to watch.
Yeah.
I've never ventured into any of those kinds of shows, so if it would maybe this is a radical thing I need to do for myself.
It's very different than any other dating show out there. I truly forgot that it involved romance. Because that's yeah, that's the hook. That's the clickbait.
Right.
The purpose is really different and profound and gorgeous.
That's great.
Yeah.
All right. I'll hold that one.
Yeah, well, I hope you're able to continue at least enjoying your romance novel and finding the nuggets of joy when they show themselves, you know?
Thank you. Yeah, we'll
Yeah.
try. Hmm.
Yeah. Okay.
Well, take good care of yourself.
Thank you. You as well. Yeah, and for all of our listeners, please subscribe, follow, share, comment, say nice things, all that.
Say real things.
What'd you say?
Say real things.
Say real things. That's better. That's better.
Yeah.
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 Okay.
Awesome.
Talk soon.
Sounds good. Bye.
Bye.